Are you looking to change up your chicken game, especially ground chicken breast? Well, add a little bacon, turn it into a meatloaf, and you have got a dish that you're gonna love, and only 2 bites or points per serving. So, hold on, we're gonna get into it now. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I'm a home cook, amateur baker, and I am sharing recipes that have helped me along my weight loss journey to lose at this point 127 pounds and share those things with you so that you can have some other options. Now, some of these recipes are mine, like the one we're going to do today, and some are from other people. Now, this one, I based it off of a recipe I got from Chef Jean-Pierre, and I will link his video down below. It was a little more, it was still using chicken, but it was also using chicken breast, and it was using ham, and so a bunch of other things, and I wanted to trim those points, calories, and bites down. First thing I did was I got a tiny little sheet pan. I have some foil lining it. And because this is where the chicken is going to sit, I'm going to spray that just to make sure that it doesn't end up sticking when I try to get it off of the pan. So I'm going to set this aside for now. And then we're going to move to the loaf pan. This is a bacon wrapped chicken meatloaf. Now, we're not going to be cooking it in this pan, but we are going to be forming it in this pan. So the first thing you're going to need to do is get some plastic wrap and line this so it's much easier to get the chicken loaf out, because you're not going to cook it in here. It's still going to be raw. So let me get some plastic wrap and we will line this up. Now, this loaf pan is an 8x4. You could use a 9x5, but I think that will be a little too large. It'll make the end product a little thin, unless you added some more ground chicken than I am. So we're just going to press this in here, just like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Like I said, you're not cooking it in here. You're going to end up pulling it out. But this is also going to help us to get the bacon onto our meatloaf. Now, when you're using bacon for Weight Watchers or iTrack bites, or even just counting calories, what you want is center cut bacon. Those are the lowest in points because there's less fat there. So you want to make sure that any kind of pork product you get is a center cut, because that's going to be better for you. Now, we're going to need 5 or 6 slices. I used 5 the first time. It depends on the thickness of the bacon. And this is pretty thick, so I might even be able to get away with 4, but I doubt it. So what you're going to do is to take the bacon and you're just going to drape it across the width of the loaf pan. And when you put the next one in, try not to overlap it too much, because you want to make sure the bacon does cook. I'm going to rotate it. Since this is a thicker end and a narrow end, I'm going to just rotate it so they're pretty even. If they're kind of short, they may want to slide back in there, but just if you tuck them over the edge, you should be fine. There is a slight bit, I almost got away with 4, but there's a slight bit at the end, so I'm going to use all 5. 5 is likely what you'll need, but in the recipe on my blog, I put 5 to 6, just in case, because I have gotten thinner pieces of bacon, and those would probably take a little bit more. There we have our pan lined with bacon. Now we're going to set this aside and move on to the next step. Okay, so I have a small pan here heating over medium-high heat. I'm just going to give it a little spray and let it heat up while I chop up the onion. Now, for those of you who have been waiting for the moment where I might chop off a finger, who knows? Here we go. So you cut, I've already peeled it obviously, but you want to cut this top part off and get rid of that. Then you're going to cut it in half so that you have flat sides. You do not want to be trying to cut something that's rounded and sliding all over the place. Now when you cut an onion into a little dice, which is going to be diced onion, you're going to cut into the center first. Then you're going to cut down into your little slices. Now I've seen chefs on like Food Network who do this part first, then slice through this width. And to me, that's more dangerous because there's more of a chance that these pieces that you're going to cut here are going to fan open and you might end up slicing a finger. So you just want a small dice on this. And it's for one small onion. So we're going to use this whole thing. And since some of this at the end, didn't want to slice into dices, I'm just going to give it a little chop this way and then do the other half. All right, so we're going to put this into the pan and let this saute. You just want to get this softened up. You're not trying to get it caramelized. You just want it softened. So I'm going to add a little salt. Add a little salt to that. And a smidge of pepper. And give it a little stir to mix that all in there. And speaking of pepper, we're going to get some roasted red peppers. You're going to use 2 of these and you're going to dice them up small like you did with the onion. And of course, this is a new jar. And I didn't open it before I started recording, which I should have known to do since my muscles are not that good. But I got it. All right, so we're just going to pluck 2 of these. If they're small, like this top one is just a remnant, you can add more than that. So here's one. Another little remnant. Seems like there's a giant one in there. That should be good. And I will sometimes toss a smidge of the pepper juice in with the onions just to enhance that flavor. And stir that around. And try not to throw all the onion out of the pan. So now for chopping the peppers, I'm just going to go across in one direction, then in another, and just keep rocking back and forth to get those into a fairly small dice. You don't have to get into the minced aspect of it, but that's good. So I'm going to throw this in with the onions. Stir this together. Now for the peppers, obviously they're already cooked. You're just going to warm those through with the onions here. So you want the onions to get to about a light golden brown, just a little soft. And I mean, it takes only a few minutes, so it's almost ready. Then we're going to add in our garlic. Now it calls for 1 tablespoon of garlic, which is 3 cloves. Usually 1 clove is approximate to 1 teaspoon, and 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon. So there you go. So you can always add a little less, add a little more, depending on your taste. Okay, now I'm gonna add in the tablespoon of garlic. It's minced garlic. I just get the one from the jar. I don't try to go through and dice cloves of garlic myself. You can if you want, but I look for simplicity where I can get it, and it's hard to come by. So take it when you can. So this takes 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley. We're not gonna add that in here. But if you're using dried parsley instead, then you would want to add that here, and instead of 2 tablespoons, you cut that down to 1/3, which would be 2 teaspoons of dried parsley, and you'd add it in here. The other ingredients that we have that are dried is some mint, 2 teaspoons of dried mint, which might seem like an odd ingredient, but it really gives it a nice little flavor. If you don't have it or you don't want to deal with it, you could leave it out, maybe add a little more thyme, which is the next 1 teaspoon of dried thyme. So I'm gonna add those here just so they can soften a little bit. I'm using fresh parsley, so I'm not gonna add that in. So the mint, this will just help the herbs to bloom, and you can smell the mint. And the thyme, stir that around just so it's not sitting on the bottom, and it gets incorporated fully into the mixture. Okay, so this is good. We're going to turn off the heat. Set that aside so it can cool down a little bit, because you don't want to be adding the hot onions into the ground chicken. Now I'm using ground chicken breast, which would be 0.0 bites. I'm on iTrack Bites Better Balance plan, which is equivalent to WW Blue. So the chicken breast has no points. If you get just ground chicken, you're gonna find that there are points. So make sure you add everything into the recipe builder as you are using it. That way you don't have any mix up on the points. Okay, so next kind of odd ingredient that we're going to add is some turkey pepperoni. You could obviously leave this out, but it does add a nice flavor to otherwise somewhat boring chicken breast. And I'm using the Hormel turkey pepperoni. I'm using 20. They're in 2 stacks of 10, and I'm just going to chop those up so I can add them in with the ground chicken. So I'm going to cut in quarters one way and in quarters the other way. And yes, I said quarters. People tease me all the time for the way I pronounce that, but that's me, baby. Now you could try to cut them all at once, but I just think it's a little easier with short stacks of 10 rather than trying to do a giant stack of 20. So that's all. You just want it chopped up into little bits. And then we're gonna add that in with our chicken breast. Now also to the chicken breast, we're gonna add a bit of salt to your taste. There's no set measurement. If you are watching your salt, obviously use less. You could probably leave it out if you needed to, because I'm sure the turkey pepperoni has a bit of saltiness. So we added the salt and pepper, and now it's 1/3 cup of breadcrumbs. I'm using panko. That's my preferred breadcrumb, but you could use seasoned breadcrumbs, plain breadcrumbs, homemade breadcrumbs. It's your call. Okay, and then we're just gonna mix this all together. Try to get it into somewhat of a homogeneous mixture before we add the eggs, because you want to get all those breadcrumbs and pepperoni incorporated into the chicken. And sometimes if you have that moisture of the eggs, might keep it from coming together the way you'd want it to. So I'm going to add in the eggs. This is 2 eggs, lightly beaten. The reason that you slightly beat the eggs before adding them in is just so that they're more homogeneous. They're easier to incorporate rather than if you have to try to break down the yolks and everything in the bowl here. And give it a good mixing right here towards the end when you're not going to have any eggs slopping out of the bowl. Now we're going to add in our onion mixture. And our parsley. Because it's fresh, like I said, you want to incorporate it later in the dish, not in the heat on the stove, because fresh herbs you usually would add towards the end of cooking. If they're dried, you want to add them towards the beginning so that they have a chance to soften up and give off their flavors. I can smell that mint from being warmed up with the onions. It smells very good. It's a nice, I mean, it seems like an odd pairing. I think once you try it, you'll lose any skepticism that you may have. All right, so there we have our loaf mixture. Now comes forming. Okay, so we have our loaf pan lined with the bacon, and we're just going to plop this in here. You just want to make sure that you are getting it all over the bacon that's laid down on the bottom. Okay, and then we're just going to pat this down to form our loaf. You don't have to worry about getting every nook and cranny in there. You'll see when you take this out if there's an even texture on the top. And it should be if you press it down. Let me take off these progressives and make sure this is even, because as I've mentioned in my blueberry cream cheese crumb bar recipe, and if you haven't checked that out, check that one out, because that's definitely a maker. Progressives can give me a little wavery feeling so that I can't tell for sure if it's even, but it is. So now in the recipe it says to fold any bacon ends onto the meatloaf. All that means is these little bits of bacon that are stuck up here, we're just going to use the plastic wrap and fold that over so that it's set onto the chicken and not hanging off to the side. Okay, and there you have it. Now the next part is to transfer it to our sheet pan. So let me get that back. Now you could just turn this right out, but I'm always afraid that I'm going to, especially with my shaky hands, jerk it and it's going to plop out instead of coming out in a nice loaf. So what I'm going to do is put this sheet pan on top, turn it upside down, and voila, there you have it. Now what I like to do is to sprinkle a little black pepper on the top, just because I like black pepper on bacon, and so does Paul. So I'm going to add this, just a hint to the top. And then we are going to put this in a 375-degree oven, which has already been preheating, for about 45 minutes, or until a thermometer put inside will show 165 degrees, which is what you want chicken breast to get to. So I will put this in the oven and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, and there you have it, the bacon wrapped chicken meatloaf. Now, if you're like me and you don't like flabby kind of bacon, the pale bacon, what I do is the last few minutes I'll put on the broiler so that it darkens up the bacon a little bit more. I put that in a recipe as a note. You may or may not want to do that. It's totally up to you. I will let this cool for just a couple of minutes before I transfer it to the cutting board, and I will show you what it looks like once we've cut it open. Okay, it's been cooling just about 3 to 4 minutes. So I'm going to remove it from the pan. The pan is still hot, so you want to be careful. And hopefully you have a long spatula like I have here, or you could use 2 spatulas, one on either side, or something along those lines. And this pan is still a little hot, so I'm going to get rid of these things and I will slice into it. Okay, so here we have our bacon wrapped meatloaf. Now I did this as 6 servings, and that will be 2 bites or 2 blue points each. If you're following calories, 224 calories. It will be, if you're following macros, fat 7.2 grams, carbohydrates 5.7 grams, and protein is 24.3 grams. Now, if you wanted to, you could make this a serving of 4, and I did calculate that in my iTrack Bites app. If you were to decide to do this into 4s, it would be 3 bites on the Better Balance plan, or 3 blue points, and calories would go to 336. Fat would be 10.8 grams. The carbs would be 8.6 grams, and the protein would be 36.4 grams for 1/4 of this. So it's still, even if you had a 1/4 of it, it's still not bad point-wise or calorie-wise. So let's take a look. Still steamy, but it's still also very moist. You can see the peppers, you can see all the little flecks of onion, some of the herbs. I mean, it's just delicious. You're gonna have to try it. And I'm gonna have to wipe off my fingers. So I hope you will give this recipe a try. It's delicious. A nice way to change up your chicken, especially ground chicken habits, and add a little bacon. Everything's better with bacon. Now, if you like this recipe, please hit that like button down below. Also, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. We'd love to have you along for the ride with us. And hit the notification bell. I am planning on doing some shorter videos. The first one I think I'm going to do is just a rundown of some of the snacks I have kept on hand. I think I'll start off with sweet snacks and then do salty snacks. But if you hit the notification bell, it'll alert you when I post those, because I'm not sure when I will be putting those up yet. And I'm hoping to make that a regular feature on this channel, where I'll do little short snacks, short savory items, like the way I cook broccoli is very easy and very tasty. And if you know anyone who's on a weight loss journey, whether it's WW, iTrack Bites, calorie counting, whatever it is, share this video with them, and maybe that will give them some inspiration as well to try something new with chicken, especially ground chicken. And don't forget to check out the recipe on my blog, which will be listed down below in the description box, along with a bunch of other links that will take you to my Instagram, my Facebook group, what have you. So until next time, I'm going to go enjoy this for dinner, and I will see you then.